Classes are taught Fridays and Saturdays in Durango, Colorado. Find out more at 970-247-9773 or at du.edu/socialwork/fourcorners. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, here for you, providing safe, quality care. Stay informed on the COVID-19 developments to protect yourself and your loved ones at sanjuanregional.com or the COVID-19 information line at 505-516-0938 or 888-949-5387. San Juan Regional Medical Center, caring for the Four Corners since 1910. Minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Wednesday morning, April 22nd. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Micklin. Thank you for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM here in San Juan County, 103.3 FM up in the Durango, Colorado area, and of course everywhere on our website at ksje.com. Good morning also to our viewers who are watching us. This is a visual radio program. We're streaming live to the KSJE Facebook page and YouTube channel, so we're glad you're with us, everybody, coming together as a community once again. Coming up this morning on the program, our topic is domestic violence and some of the instances that we are hearing about during the coronavirus and some of the self-quarantine and folks staying at home. There are increased incidents of domestic violence, so I've invited my guests from the Family Crisis Center to come on the program to talk a little bit about that with me this morning, so stay tuned for that, everybody. Later on this hour, communications professor Dr. Mike Haddabaugh will be joining me at 8:50 a.m. from the Encouragement Lab. And this morning we're talking about social media, and Dr. Haddabaugh is explaining why he has decided to stop calling out fake news posts on Facebook from some of his Facebook friends. He'll explain why coming up this morning at 8:50 a.m. with me on KSJE. We'll go to our coronavirus local information program this morning online at 9 a.m. Megan Cullip will be joining me here in Studio A. We'll be streaming that program again to the KSJE YouTube channel and Facebook page. Our guest today is New Mexico Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, and also Sheila Mobley will be calling in to talk about her project to honor local high school seniors. So we'll be sharing that information today at 9 a.m. on our Facebook and YouTube pages. You'll be able to hear the program later on this afternoon. On the radio side of things at 9, Mick Hess will take us roving with the arts. It, of course, is our weekday classical music program, and today Mick is playing music from the great Gustav Mahler, Songs of the Earth today, a special 90-minute version of Roving with the Arts, which takes us to 10:30, and our local and regional author program right on Four Corners. Tracy Hales-Vass is speaking with this author, Megan Baldridge, about her latest book, which is called Knitting Matters. And you'll hear more about that. Megan, of course, is a local regional author from New Mexico. We'll be speaking with her today at 10:30 right here on KSJE. Again, a rebroadcast of our local coronavirus program at 5:06 every afternoon on KSJE. Don't forget, in addition to Facebook and YouTube, we invite you to follow us on Twitter and check out KSJE on Instagram as well. A windy day throughout the region today. There's a fire weather warning in the southern part of San Juan County today. Today's high 69 degrees in Farmington, 38 overnight, windy again tomorrow with a high near 70 on Thursday. Mostly sunny and 68 degrees by Friday, mid-70s and sunshine on Saturday. And what about partly sunny skies and lower 80s on Sunday with overnight lows creeping up to near 50 degrees. Joining me this morning to talk a little bit about the issue of domestic violence in San Juan County from the Family Crisis Center in the community. Opal Cole is here. She is the executive director of the Family Crisis Center. Opal, good morning. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Also joining us is one of the counselors from Family Crisis Center. Candice Garcia is here as well. And Candice, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us as well. Opal, let me start with you a little bit and talk to me about the issue of domestic violence and what you're seeing during this time of shelter in place and shelter at home. This has got to be a concern for you if someone is in a domestic violent situation, correct?
Yes, it is. Our concern is actually about victims getting to us.
Right.
We still, of course, have our hotline, and so they have access and can call our advocates if they have that opportunity. But there are times when we've gotten calls and folks are expressing an interest in coming into shelter, but we're not seeing that number. So they're not actually arriving at our facility. And we're not sure if that's because they're having transportation issues or again, because they're, sheltering in place with an abuser.
Right. And that's always got to be in the back of your mind, I guess, if they maybe can't get out of that situation or they're just being under so much of a watchful eye, they don't feel safe making a move or even making that call could put them, I guess, in potential danger. Is that true?
Right. Yes, that's correct.
Got you. And Candice, do you see any of this with the work that you do? I know as a counselor that you may be seeing folks in a different time, correct? They've already gotten out and are trying to come to you for more help?
Yeah, we definitely, once they get to us, they're usually in a different a phase. Some of them, of course, might still be in unsafe situations because they've, just because they're going to counseling doesn't necessarily mean that they've left their partner. They may still be in an abusive relationship. So we kind of get people at different phases. Some have left, some have not. I'm seeing a lot of people in crisis, even people that were stable before might be in crisis now because we're all in crisis trying to learn how to cope with this new reality and everything, all these uncertainties that we're all dealing with. So.
Right, and that is very, very true. And so when we've got stuff like this going on in the world, in the country, in the community, and maybe folks are experiencing job loss, money problems, things like that, that causes stress, that causes anxiety, and that sometimes causes domestic violence situations. Is that right, Opal?
Yes, and I mean, if there's a propensity towards violence anyway in a relationship, all of the factors you just mentioned basically are just going to make that worse.
Right.
And so, our goal is to be there to provide that support as well as to provide shelter if they need that. But it's also a little difficult right now to get folks in.
Correct. And tell me a little bit, for folks who maybe aren't familiar with the Family Crisis Center, I know that organization has been in this community for a long time and serving in that capacity for a long time. And now, of course, with the counseling services that you provide and the shelter that you provide, it really is a needed service in the area now more than ever, it seems.
Yes. Family Crisis has been in the community right now 42 years. And of course, we started as a shelter program and added counseling at some point. Initially they started counseling and offender groups actually in local restaurants in the community and that kind of thing. And so we have continued to provide counseling. Shelter, of course, is one of our primary services. And we also work with offenders. So we do have a 52-week program for offenders. And during this time, our counselors who work with that program is also making every effort to try and reach that offender so that they can work with them to maybe de-escalate situations or provide ideas and suggestions of how they might handle some of the stress that they're experiencing.
Got you. And I'll ask Candice Garcia about some of her work as a counselor with those offenders in a moment. But Opal, I want to ask you too about when someone has called the Family Crisis Center for maybe the first time. There is usually, right, been a lot that leads up to that person being strong enough to make that phone call, right? Usually they maybe come close to making that call, but when they actually make that call, that is a big, big step, is it not?
It's a huge step. And one of the things is we consider our work successful when someone is able to make that call and is able to make that decision to at least leave the home, even if it's on a temporary basis, the hope is that every time they contact us, we provide a morsel of information that allows them to be stronger and to be able to make decisions in their lives that will make them safer. But yes, it does sometimes for some victims, it takes a really long time for them to get to that point.
And some folks may not understand why that is. And of course, every case is different and every case is unique. But is there something that you can tell us to try to help us understand why it takes some folks such a long period of time, perhaps, or several attempts to make that call to maybe remove themselves from an abusive situation?
Well, I think some of it is history. Mm-hmm. And so if you have had a long history of being in that situation, it's what you know. There are times, with each person, there's a different reason why they stay. And so actually, we prefer sometimes if people don't ask us that question.
Okay,
but it's
sure.
One of the questions that we get a lot.
Right.
Their economic issues, the victims are sometimes dependent, or most times dependent on their partners, their kids involved, and sometimes that mom or dad wants to have, that partner wants their kids to have their dad or mom in that household. So the reasons are varied. You also have that intimidation that's there, that fear that comes with, if I leave, what happens? How do I make ends meet? How do I really set up a household on my own? The other piece that we need to understand is one of the most dangerous times for a victim is when she attempts to leave or actually leaves that household.
That's when that victim is most at risk, you mean, of potential violence or things like that?
Yes, the violence at that time could escalate because this is about power and control.
Right.
And if she walks away, that person, or he walks away, that person now has lost their control over that individual. And so the violence could escalate.
I see. I understand. And that's why that's such a big, powerful step for the victim's standpoint to make that decision to get out or to make a change. I understand that completely. My guest this morning from the Farmington Family Crisis Center, we were talking about some of the services that are available and the increased risks of domestic violence during this time of pandemic across the world. And I asked both of you before we came on the air this morning if you're seeing additional calls to your hotline, to your facility. Opal, you're seeing a bit more calls, but not as many folks maybe getting to you. Is that the idea?
Exactly. We have had the hotline calls, but they're not actually reaching our program, or the shelter at least.
Right. And this is a problem, domestic violence, that really doesn't have any stereotypical victim necessarily. It reaches across all socioeconomic levels, does it not? It can impact both men and women. Same-sex couples, all that. You see these things happen in all those cases, correct?
Yes, it impacts everyone. It doesn't matter how much you make. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. DV crosses all of those boundaries, all of those lines. We do also serve victims who are males, and we do accept them into shelter. Anyone that has a domestic violence issue, we make every effort to provide a service. Right. And that includes shelter.
Right. And talk to me a little bit about the shelter. Is it fairly full and folks can go there and they can stay there for how long if they're allowed into the shelter? In terms of length of stay, yes,
they can stay up to 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
And during that period of time, of course, we try to help them if they're interested in finding housing and that kind of thing. We help to assist them if they're interested in work, to help them find work so that they can be self-sufficient if that's the goal. If they choose to go back home, then we do a lot of safety planning, hopefully that will help them to come up with strategies that would help to keep them safer if they do choose to go back home. That's one of the most important things also, I think, for a victim, empowering them so that they're able to make their own decisions. Because again, so often that's something that they've not been allowed to do. So we make every effort to help them to get to that place.
Right. And many times with these victims, you have victims with children in tow as well, right? So the shelter has to accommodate all of them as a safe place.
We do sometimes have lots of kids running around. In terms of right now, our numbers, as I mentioned, is a little lower than it normally would be. And so, of course, that continues to be a concern. And that's actually another reason why we're thankful that you've given us this opportunity to hopefully put the information out there that we are open and we are accepting folks.
There's room. If someone is in a situation, they can get out. And I guess that leads me back to that original maybe scenario of maybe folks are in this domestic violence situation, but because nobody's leaving the house, it's very difficult to make a call, very difficult to pack, very difficult to just get out without, again, maybe encountering violence or who knows what in those situations. And that's perhaps the issue.
Exactly.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. Candice Garcia, let me turn back to you a little bit about the counseling aspect of this. And so can you talk to us a little bit about your work then? You're working with victims and then in some cases the abusers as well. Is that true?
Yes. We have several counselors. We work with the entire family. I mean, we are we're the family crisis center, so we work with all aspects of the family. I work with victims individually, and then I also help with our offender groups, both the female and the male groups.
Right. And is that sometimes when folks come to you and they would really like to get back together? And I imagine, again, every case is different, every couple is unique, but it takes both sides, I suppose, to try to work towards that, right? If there is any type of reunification that's possible after a domestic violence situation?
Well, yeah. I mean, if the family is wanting to work towards being healthy, yeah, both parties are going to have to work towards that.
Understood.
We don't. Yeah.
It's not always possible, I suppose, right? Or that's not necessarily the goal, but talk to me a little bit. Go ahead.
I would just like to say in terms of that piece,
yes,
and to make clear, we don't do couples counseling. That's not recommended, of course, in domestic violence situations. What we do is that we try to work with the individuals separately. And if, down the road when they've each done their work, then they choose to maybe get together and do communication skills and that kind of thing, we may do that, but it's usually not recommended to have any kind of couples counseling because, again, that power and control continues in that situation. And so under no circumstances do we do that.
I understand, and that's a great point. Thank you, Opal, for making that, and that explains again why the work that Candice does is so important. Because Candice, again, you are working then with the victims, and then maybe separately, or there's different counselors that are working with the offenders, and maybe they've been sentenced to come to Family Crisis Center for this counseling. Is that what usually happens?
Yeah, with the offenders, a lot of times we get offenders that have they're coming from probation or
right.
They've got some sort of charge or something. So that's that a lot of times that's how they get to us. I find that a lot of them get a lot of positive things from the groups. At first there's some resistance because it's something new and they're not sure what to expect, but once they've been to a few groups and they kind of settle in and they've learned like how things are going to work, I find that there's a lot of growth, and they actually look forward to group and enjoy it. So.
Okay, and that's interesting. And how long are they usually in counseling for? Is there an average amount of time or a set amount of time that they're with you?
Our offender program is 52 weeks.
That's what I think I remember Opal telling me that, or you did at the beginning of this interview. So thank you for that. And then tell me about the counseling then for the victims, because again, you are trying to help them through what they have been through, and talk to me a little bit about how that works.
Of course, counseling is going to look different for every person. Everyone's going to have, different needs. So we meet them where they are. We help them figure out what are their main goals. We work towards those. We also offer support groups. We have groups for our victims as well. We have a domestic violence support group, and then we also offer some anger management and codependency to kind of help victims connect with with others. There's a lot of healing that occurs in groups, in community, when people can connect with other people that are going through similar things. So we try to provide that as well.
I see. All right. Thank you very much. Opal Cole, let me turn back to you a little bit about how we rank in San Juan County, if you have this information at your fingertips, or even our state in New Mexico when it comes to domestic violence. How are we doing? And I'm afraid to ask the question, but I think it's important.
San Juan County right now, I believe, ranks 3rd in the state in terms of our domestic violence calls.
And that's not a good number 3. That's a large number.
I believe last year the number of calls from the police department was over 700.
Right.
So yeah, and those are just the calls that went in. A lot of times, victims, of course, don't report DV.
Right.
I know we also got over 600 hotline calls last year. And that number actually is a little low for us, but we were over 600 last year. We provided over 10,000 bed nights last year also.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, let me share some of these phone numbers. We've been talking about the hotline and ways that folks can get help. So if folks are watching this program or listening to this program on the radio, we invite them to take advantage of the services at the Family Crisis Center. So again, you have access and offer a 24-hour hotline. So if someone is in a domestic violence situation, they can always call that number and get in contact with someone that can refer them to services, correct?
Exactly. We have our advocates respond to that line 24/7. And so if anyone is in danger, they can reach out and call that hotline number. We have a local number. Do you need me to give that number now, Scott?
I've got it on the screen, but if you want to read it too, I bet you memorized it, so I bet you know it. Go ahead.
I actually can't see that on your screen, so
that's true, but I can sit down. It's 505-564-9192.
Right.
Is the local number. Then you also have a toll-free number, correct?
Correct.
And that's that 888-440-9192 number.
Yes.
And then for emergencies, you always advise folks to call 911.
Exactly. And if someone choose not to call the hotline, they can also call the office. During this time, we are still open at our office, and we are accepting calls.
Okay. And I have that number up too. That's 505-325-3549.
Correct.
There you go. And your website, FamilyCrisisCenterNM.org.
Yes, and they can also message us on our website or go to our Facebook page and message us there too.
Correct. Good advice, and that's important information for both our radio audience and our video audience this morning as we talk about this important issue. And I also want to share from both of you, Opal, maybe you could start about any signs that maybe, because I know maybe sometimes individuals, it takes a while, as we've mentioned, to maybe make that call, but maybe sometimes friends or family members can maybe see that the individual might be in a situation, a relationship that's not very healthy, and maybe they can be looking for signs, or what would you say we should be looking for if we have someone that we care about and are concerned about, to maybe try to get them to make a call?
Well, and I think it's a little strange right now because we are talking about isolation.
True.
But isolation is one of the big things that victims often experience. If you're seeing bruises on people, that's unusual. And sometimes talking with the victim and asking them privately, having the ability to talk with them and find out where those bruises might have come from.
Sure. Through a phone call, would that tell you anything necessarily if you're on a phone call with someone, or maybe you're not able to call them as frequently as you used to be? Is that something maybe that could be a sign?
Yeah, I think that's a part of that isolation.
Yeah.
So if you have family members or friends that typically would be more outgoing, folks that you're in contact with, and all of a sudden they're not reaching out, or they're telling you stories that they're not allowed to use the phone, or they no longer have their phone because someone's taken it away. All of those kinds of means, or if someone starts talking down to them, name calling, all of those are things. If you're in a family situation or a gathering of friends and you're listening to, someone call their partner names, I think those are all things that would send up red flags for some of us, or should.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense to me. Candice, Garcia, do you have any other things that we could be looking for or watching for with friends or family members who might be in a domestic violence situation during this time?
Opal answered that one really well. Domestic violence is all about power and control. So if one person in the relationship has no power and the other one has all the control of everything, whether that be the finances or whom the other person communicates with and whatnot, then those are big signs that red flags that something's going on that shouldn't be.
Sure. Understood. And Opal, you mentioned too, again, during this time of isolation, that's one less way that maybe folks around these individuals have to see if they're in some kind of unhealthy relationship, because no one's going out to lunch anymore. No one's getting together at the park with the kids as much as we used to. And so that's something that we can't really use anymore, at least during this time, right?
Right. But I think if when it comes to a telephone call or even text messages and things like that, if you're not able to reach that person for maybe long periods of time on the phone, or you reach out and they can't talk to you on the phone, because they're not being allowed to.
Yeah, sure.
Or their text messages are being monitored and you might not necessarily know that. But I think those are things right now that we can look at or consider, because we're all locked down. But when it comes to that isolation piece, I think trying to reach out to folks by phone and having those contacts right now are important. And if that's not happening, if victims can't talk to you for whatever reason, if there's a lot of shouting and stuff going on, if you're on a call with someone, and you're able to ask those questions, how are you doing? The other piece is to think about the kids, because the kids are also locked down and the kids are also used as pawns at times in relationships. So those are all things that I think we need to look at.
Sure. And even, I guess, reaching out, even if you can't make a phone call, maybe reaching out through an email or a instant message or text message, I suppose. Maybe that would be an easier way to communicate if someone is being watched all the time.
Right.
Right.
So long as they have access to that phone, yes.
Right. Exactly. And so, and again, we talked about the problem of domestic violence does not have any really typical case, somebody could be in a relationship for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, a marriage, a relationship, and still have get into a domestic violence situation. You've seen that, I'm sure, too, right?
Certainly, yes. We serve all ages.
Right.
And so, from newborns all the way up. We've got 60-year-olds in shelter. We've got 70-year-olds that come into shelter. The age really doesn't matter. I should also mention that we do have a program that serves the elderly. And so that program, because what happens with someone who is an older person, they're often exploited. So the abuse might not be physical sometimes with the elderly, but there's lots of financial exploitation. There's transportation exploitation. So you may have that mom or grandma who's at home and the caregiver becomes abusive to that individual. And so we have had older folks come into shelter. I mean, I
Right.
think the last time we had a 73-year-old, several months ago.
Right.
So yeah, it just varies.
And that brings up an interesting point too. That in that case, it's a caregiver and an individual in a domestic violence situation. Doesn't necessarily have to be more of a romantic relationship. Then more of a business
Exactly.
relationship, right? That's also part of domestic violence, right? Or could
Yes. So we see families that are being abusive to each other, and so it might be a brother and a sister. It might be a daughter or a son being abusive to a mom. So it's DV takes all forms. It's not just intimate partner violence that we provide services for.
Right, and that's a great point, and we need to be aware of all of those possibilities, I suppose, is true. Well, we are just about out of time this morning, but I do want to repeat those phone numbers for folks who are joining us that are maybe needing to reach out, and again, we encourage them to do so. They can do it, again, through the 24-hour hotline to the Family Crisis Center. Again, the local number is 505-564-9192. Toll-free is 888-440-9192. Emergencies, of course, always call 911. And the office of the Family Crisis Center is 505-325-3549. You can also reach out through Facebook at Family Crisis Center and the website familycrisiscenternm.org. Any final thoughts from either one of you or Opal?
Just to say we're here and we are ready to support the community and provide the services. So if anyone needs to talk, they can always reach out to us.
Very good, as you've been doing for 4 decades. Not you personally, Opal, but Family Crisis Center. But I know you've been there a long time.
2.
I understand, that's true. Very good. And Candice Garcia, what about any final words from you, please?
I just want to reiterate what Opal said. We're here and we're working. We're not closed, so we want to be able to help the people in our community as we're going through this difficult time.
Very good. Well, we appreciate all the work that both of you do, and the rest of the staff, of course, at the Family Crisis Center to keep our residents and friends and neighbors safe. And again, it's a job you've been doing for almost more than 4 decades here in the community, and we appreciate that. Thank you both for joining me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. My guests from the Family Crisis Center, Opal Cole and Candice Garcia, here with me on KSJE. This program on KSJE is supported by Citizens Trust and Investment Corporation, providing a competent, innovative, and caring team of professionals to serve wealth management, trust administration, employee benefit plans, retirement planning, and estate settlement needs. Find out more about Citizens Trust and Investment Corporation at